Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey.
We have done some very, very big movies here on the 6M. I mean big. I don't mean big. I mean big. Effing big. Really effing big, okay? I'm talking cultural movies that just, they pop culture perspective anyway, that stay with you, that exist through generations. I'm not kidding. Like, if you're a fan of the show and you followed us for any given time, then you know we've tackled some of the biggest films, in my estimation, ever made. We've tackled the original Star Wars trilogy. It's there. You talk about something that's going to stand the test of time, and absolutely has done it. We've done modern classics like Training Day. We've done the original X-Men films, movies again that, the Avengers franchise. We've done all those films. And, other films like the original Terminator and T2. Again, huge films. The original Superman film. I could go on and on and on. We've done movies that, again, in my estimation, well, not just in my estimation, but honestly, in the opinion of a lot of people out there, these movies are going to be around for a good long time. And these films have influenced films that came afterward. These films set up franchises in many, many cases. And we're still seeing sequels and prequels and streamers and comic books and novels and podcasts and, audiobook presentations on Audible. I mean, their catchphrases stick with us through pop culture. The original, the Hangover trilogy. And again, a lot of this stuff is like more modern. I get that. We're not going all the way back to like black and white era films here that we're talking about, kids. But you get it. Movies that, again, are just going to stand the test of time, that are always going to be with us. That's what we're talking about here today. And it wasn't until I started making notes and really digging into this film that I've seen 200 times, if I've seen it once in my life, that you really begin to appreciate how big and important this film truly is and the impact it has had on Hollywood, on American pop culture, on pop culture around the world. This movie that's still being felt, that we're still talking about, that we reference in other films. Case in point, the Avengers trilogy. In Endgame, we reference this film. This film has been referenced in TV shows, in music, in books, you name it. People have talked about this film. It's Back to the Future, of course, obviously. And I'm telling you, if we did a 4-hour podcast with 6 of us, I don't know that we would be able to do this justice. I'm not kidding. And again, we've tackled some big films that I rolled my sleeves up and said, oh, I can't wait to do it. This is going to be a blast. By the way, I'm anxious to do this too, but I'm telling you, there's no chance we're going to be able to do this justice. We're going to talk about it. We're going to hit you with some trivia stuff that you may or may not know. We're going to talk to you about references in other places. We're going to talk, I suspect, a little bit about time travel. And we're going to do all that in the course of this review. But I guarantee you, we're not going to be able to hit on every possible thing that we could talk about because it's just that big. And I know what you're thinking. Tom, it's an 80s film. Relax. Again, if you've not seen it, then you can't appreciate it. I'm telling you. The impact this movie has made, it's sometimes it's beyond words. And again, you don't really know it until you start digging into it. Trust me, it's there, and you'll see it as we go through it, more than likely. Let's talk about it. Back to the Future is a 1985 American science fiction film directed by Robert Zemeckis and written by Zemeckis and Bob Gale. It stars Michael J. Fox, of course, and an assorted cast of characters. It is set in 1985 and follows Marty McFly, a teenager accidentally sent back to 1955 in a time traveling DeLorean automobile built by his eccentric scientist friend Emmett Doc Brown, where he inadvertently prevents his future parents from falling in love, threatening his own existence, and is forced to reconcile them and somehow get, you guessed it, Back to the Future. This film released July 3rd, 1985. The total running time is 116 minutes by Universal Pictures, by the way. The budget for this film is $19 million. The box office, $388.8 million. That is your lowdown on Back to the Future. Phil, have I oversold this to the audience? Have I gone overboard? I mean, how big and impactful is this film in your estimation?
I don't think it's possible to uh, oversell how important Back to the Future is. Uh, One of the biggest cultural phenomenons of the past 2 decades. um, I don't. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find any movie over the last 30 years or so that's endured as long as this movie has had and had this big of an influence. People are still to this day uh, doing cosplays or doing homages and all these other things. You constantly see it referenced all over the place. Uh, this is. I mean, who doesn't love Back to the Future? It's one of those movies that you can probably have a conversation with anybody from any walk of life about this movie.
Yeah, 100%, dude. No doubt about it. And to your point, we were talking off mic before we started recording. There's haters for every genre, for every property, for every universe. Anyone hating on the Back to the Future stuff, I don't get it. And look, I'm not a I'm not a huge fan of parts 2 and 3. I enjoy them, but for me part 1 is the best in my opinion, but I don't hate any of it. Like to your point, man, like I just don't know how anyone could hate any of this stuff, man. By the way, do you have a favorite of the trilogy?
I think it's two. I think the second one is probably one of the most well received sequels of all time.
Hmm.
Um, I, you talked about something that went up in scope in every single way and did everything a sequel's supposed to do. It's supposed to uh, add new stakes. It's supposed to make the movie feel bigger and all these other things, and it absolutely did that.
Yeah, I agree. And look, kids, it's going to be a little difficult to not talk about 2 and 3 as we talk about this film, and we're probably going to discuss it. But look, there's every possibility we're going to do parts 2 and 3. So we're going to try not to get ourselves too awful sidetracked here, and we'll try to stick to just this film. But we'll talk about it in passing, I'm sure, as we go. Phil, we'll talk about Michael J. Fox quite a bit here shortly. Are you surprised that nothing has happened with this universe to this point? I mean, the last thing that happened was, part 3 in 1990. I mean, are you surprised that we still have not revisited this at all?
I'm surprised that no one has tried to do a reboot or something at this point. I'm kind of glad that it hasn't happened yet. I don't want a reboot.
Mm,
I don't think we need any sequels. I don't think you need to keep revisiting the franchise. With the amount of franchises from that time period, or even from the early '90s that people have gone back to. I mean, shoot, we're on like Jurassic Park movie number 8 or 9 at this point.
yeah.
um, then there's so many other movies that they've gone back to. I'm a bit surprised that they haven't, but I really don't need it.
Yeah. I think it could stand alone. I do think with the right script, and if you somehow wanted to unpack the whole time traveling thing and say that this was Marty's son, Marty's son and daughter that somehow get wrapped up in this, or that the technology of Dark Brown was discovered by somebody else. I mean, it gets a little convoluted the more you have to explain it. But I don't know. I think in the right hands, with the right creative people attached, it could be a massive hit. But I don't know, man. I'm with you. I kind of think why touch it now?
Yeah. I mean, there's ideas for something that they could do with it, but why? Why would you need it?
Mm.
I mean, for me, I don't think you should try and do like a outright sequel, and I don't think we need a reboot. Um, I've always kind of thought like if they did want to do it, they should just cast somebody as Biff and have it fill in all the time between the future that Marty goes back to and him getting the sports almanac and doing all these things to get rich. I think like a TV show about just young Biff Tannen doing all these terrible things to get rich is a good show.
Oh, I kind of think I'd be here for that, honestly.
Yeah, so it's essentially kind of like a prequel slash like spinoff.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'd be here for that. It's worth mentioning, kids, that this film in 2007, excuse me, was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry. And Phil, that's not something that's thrown around freely, dude.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
It's pretty big. There's the first film to give you some kind of idea. 2001: A Space Odyssey was the first film inducted in '91, and there's just a litany of classic films in here. Uh, Everything from Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein to The African Queen to The Adventures of Robin Hood, the first Alien film, all that jazz, All the President's Men. I mean, down to Blazing Saddles. It's in the archives, kids. Go check it out. Boys in the Hood is in here. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's a who's who of classic films, man, for sure, and it absolutely deserves its place here. Uh, One of the things that is talked about, and we'll tackle this right out the gate, is we know who Eric Stoltz is, and we know that Eric Stoltz was the original choice to play Marty McFly. But during the course of filming, and by the way, kids, that footage is on the YouTube. You can go find it. It's been uploaded, been there for a while. There's some scenes with him and George McFly in the diner. I mean, there's stuff out there with him and Doc Brown too on the YouTube. And Zemeckis decided, Phil, that even though they had already filmed, they had some scenes shot with him, he just felt like the guy wasn't the right fit. Stoltz is a really, really good actor.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine if this film had been finished? I mean, you've seen that footage, I'm guessing. What did you think about Stoltz as Marty McFly?
I've actually never seen the footage.
Oh,
That's always been one of those big myths of what could have been if he was Marty and not Michael J. Fox. That would have completely changed Michael J. Fox's career, of course.
mm-hmm.
Would change Stokes' career. It's a plot line from another time travel movie. It's a plot line from the Flash movie.
It is.
But yeah, I don't know. I just can't imagine anybody else as Marty other than Michael J. Fox at this point. But this after watching this movie for 30 plus years at this point.
Yeah. The footage is a bit jarring because, dude, the sets are identical. It's the same sets, and it's the same George McFly in character, in makeup, with Eric Stoltz sitting beside of him. And you're like, is this CG? Has someone digitally replaced him? And you're like, no, that's actually Eric Stoltz. But yeah, dude, it would have been a much different movie because he's not the same mannerisms, not the same youthful exuberance, I guess you could say, as Michael J. Fox was in his time. I mean, yeah, it definitely would have been a different movie for sure. So, talking about the cast, Phil, one of the things that makes this movie work, besides Michael J. Fox, of course, is the cast. And you have like sort of the trilogy of actors who are still friends, who do the cons together. And, unfortunately, we know Michael J. Fox's condition has, I don't know if it's gotten worse, but, at any given time when you see footage of him, your heart goes out to him because the guy's just really been struggling with Parkinson's. And there's a documentary, I think it's on Apple TV. It's excellent, but it'll make you emotional if you've ever cared about this guy. But man, he's still fighting, Phil. He's still out there. He's still trying to, of course, keep his head above water. But, first off, before we get into the cast, Michael J. Fox in this film is fantastic. We have to mention that he was filming Teen Wolf and this movie and working on the TV show. For some reason, I'm blanking on the TV show now.
Family Ties.
Family Ties. How did I blank on the TV show? He was filming all at the same time. This guy was getting no sleep at all. And again, to your point, Phil, it's not the same film for sure. Definitely not the same trilogy without Michael J. Fox. It can't be overstated the job this guy did, right? I mean, he's fantastic in this movie.
Yeah. Talk about like one of the biggest stars of that era. Uh, the end guy. The hot up and coming young actor to
Hmm.
use in a big franchise. Before the Brat Pack was a thing, before Shia LaBeouf was a thing and not a thing, before any of that, there was Michael J. Fox, and man, he is great in this movie. As likable as a main protagonist you want him to be. You root for all of his cool movements. You groan and shake your head at all of the mistakes he makes. Uh, he's perfect. He's perfect in this movie. Uh, I said the time period would not be what it is without Michael J. Fox. I mean, Teen Wolf is a show. Is a movie that got the shows and everything afterwards. So we've seen them try to do this franchise without him. We saw them try to do sequels without him, and no, doesn't have any of the charm that the initial movie had without him. If you wanted any proof of what he brings to a franchise.
Yeah, that's fair. We love Jason Bateman, but yeah, that Teen Wolf 2 is not a good movie.
No, it is not. It just doesn't have any appeal of come on, man. We need Michael J. Fox in this thing, being nervous and playing basketball, and for some reason doing handstands on a car while it drives down the street. I don't know. Teen Wolf's just one of those memorable movies, man. Love that movie. Every now and then, I think about the last basketball game at the end in the montage and this epic comeback they have. Um, one of the most '80s movies ever, man.
Oh, for sure. And the best scene in the entire film when he wolfs out for the first time, opens the door, his dad is wolfed out, and he's like, "Look, I know you got some questions." And he's like very calm. It's one of the funniest things to this day I've ever seen.
Really, really funny, man. I can't tell you how many times I think of something ending well, and then like the slow music comes on the end of the movie, and the credits start rolling.
Yeah.
When you're shooting for the moon.
Oh God. Typical 80s. Yeah.
80s classic.
Yeah. The Touch by Stan Bush in the Transformers movie. That song has been parodied and ripped off so many times. Yeah. Same
Yeah,
vibe.
we get that in this movie a bit with Huey Newton, Power of Love, and the
Yeah.
soundtrack.
Hey, shout out to Huey Lewis and the Newsman. Those guys sold so many records in their day, and Huey Lewis, great voice. And man, I was a big Huey Lewis fan. Yeah, they defined that era for sure. Talk about doing soundtracks and whatnot. Of course, they do the soundtrack here, and it's, our friends at the Ghostbusters franchise wanted them to do that song as well, but they politely said no, however that worked out. And then next thing you know, Ray Parker Jr. releases a little song called Ghostbusters, and you're like, wait a minute,
Worked out pretty well for them.
that kind of sounds like I want a new drug. That sounds weird. The judge agreed, by the way, kids. So,
All those things aside, worked pretty well for their franchise. They got a pretty massive hit out of the Ray Parker record.
yep, yep.
Is what it is. Huey Lewis in the news in this movie as well. I don't care how many times I see it. You would think that it's supposed to be cheesy when they do bring that song in early in the movie, where
Yeah.
um, Marty gets the note from Jennifer, and it's the number. There's her grandmother, and it just says "I love you" on it. And he looks right at the screen, and trademark cool moment. That's the power of love.
Yes. Hair's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, but every time it works because Marty is just cool, man. Like Marty is effortlessly cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Effortlessly cool. Can't say any better. And of course, Michael J. Fox, I learned how to play guitar. He still play. Dude, did you see the clip with him on stage with Coldplay and Glastonbury recently?
I did not.
Wow, dude. They had him on stage. He's in a chair, of course, but he's playing along with Coldplay. Like the fans were losing their minds. It was very cool to see. So, not a big Coldplay guy, but I am a Michael J. Fox guy. So that was awesome.
Coldplay has a few songs I like, but I can't say that I'm like this big Coldplay fan.
Nah.
That does just sound like a cool moment, and again, that just goes to show just how big of a star Michael J. Fox is.
Oh yeah, for sure. We have to, of course, talk about Doc Brown, Christopher Lloyd, the great Christopher Lloyd. Too bad we don't knight people in this country. He'd be Sir Christopher Lloyd, in my estimation. The guy is so awesome, has done so many cool things through the years. Uh, Phil, to be known in your lifetime, in your career as an actor, as one highly memorable character is one thing. To be known as two, I mean, most actors would kill for that. I mean, he was Reverend Jim in Taxi, of course, and he will forever be Doc Brown for the next generation of fans. Like, this guy is, without Doc Brown and Marty McFly, Phil, we don't get Rick and Morty. I mean, it's crazy to think about how far, again, kids, we tried to tell you the impact this film had on pop culture. Hello. Great example. What can you say about Christopher Lloyd that hadn't been said, man? He's fantastic in this movie for sure.
Yeah, he's so great. One of the greatest character actors of our time, man. Like, I mean, you're saying Taxi Cab, and of course, Doc Brown, but like I immediately think Fester. I think the villain he plays in the Dennis the Menace movie. So he's done so many great things throughout the career. All time great in my opinion. But he's tremendous in this. This movie does not work without him. Um, he is just such a great he contrasts with Marty in every way, where Marty is cool and just kind of composed in some ways. He's just wild and wide-eyed, as as Biff describes him, and uh, he's going a mile a minute. He's thinking about 100 different things at once. Everything you would think of somebody that could invent time travel, and how they'd be very smart, but also they'd be kind of absent-minded in a way because they're thinking about too many things at once, and he does it perfectly. I mean, all of the characteristic traits that you would think that that kind of person would have, he absolutely nails it.
Oh, for sure. And you talk about memorable characters. 3 years later, in 1988, Robert Zemeckis, of course, directs Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Christopher Lloyd is Judge Doom. Who can forget Judge Doom?
Another great character. He's so many great characters he played throughout his career. Did you see, by the way, that interview that Eddie Murphy just did? And Eddie Murphy said that he turned down Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
I did not see that. I know he's been all over the place for the Axel F movie, but I did not see that.
Yeah, because of course they asked him about turning down Ghostbusters, and that spun into a question about what is a movie that he's turned down that he regretted. And his reasoning for not doing Ghostbusters is that he was filming the original Beverly Hills Cop, and so that worked out for him. He got a massive hit. Yeah, he wasn't a part of this other hit, but he was also a part of his own franchise where he was the main star. But he talked about how he turned down Who Framed Roger Rabbit because he couldn't understand the idea of, like, what do you mean it's going to be live action and cartoon at the same time? That sounds terrible. Turns out, massive hit.
Massive hit. Well, as a side note, they wanted Harrison Ford, who was too expensive. Chevy Chase was the second choice. He didn't want it. Bill Murray was considered, but he missed out on it. Eddie Murphy, like you said, Robin Williams, Robert Redford, Jack Nicholson, Sylvester Stallone, Edward James Olmos, Ed Harris, Charles Grodin were all considered for the role, and then Bob Hoskins got it. I mean, dude, what?
Yeah, it's a different movie with all of those guys you named. It's a completely different movie with Eddie Murphy in it. Completely different movie with Bill Murray in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of feel like you needed a no-name guy because you have all of these cartoon characters and larger than life figures in it. You need somebody to subdue, and I think putting another comedian on screen with all those cartoon characters was a bit too much. You needed a straight guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. And Bob Hoskins did a bang up job.
Yeah.
For sure. By the way, speaking of doing a bang up job, we talked about Doc Brown, of course, and Marty. We had to talk about Marty's mom, Lorraine. And this, of course, is Leah Thompson. Full disclosure, I was 12 years old when this movie came out. And you talk about crush, dude, flat out. It was Carrie Fisher for me, and Leah Thompson, Phil. Leah Thompson is perfect. I can find no fault, Your Honor, at all with her performance. It is, to me, it's flawless. She's sweet. She's innocent. As the mom, she's grizzled in the first iteration of his mom, not happy with her life. When we see her at the end, she's a much different person. Like Phil, she's great in this movie, dude.
She's great. She manages to do all three versions of that character well,
Mm.
and just how well the movie is written, the material she's given, she works very well with it. And the first act of the movie, as kind of like this older, like you said, jaded mother, and saying, "Ah, you don't call a boy." And then we see her do everything that she tells Marty that she hates about his current girlfriend
Mm-hmm.
and in the past. And it's so great because it's like, of course, your parents were people before they had you. All right. And so
Sure.
you, of course, don't know who your parent was. And they, of course, grew and matured into somebody completely different. But yeah, she manages to make all of those bits work. I laugh every time uh, when they go to the dance and he's like he's planning to be a jerk to her, and he turns around and she's like taking cigarettes. He's like, "Wait a minute, you smoke?" And she's just like, "What?"
Yeah. 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 He's like, she's got booze. Like, hey, you smoke too? Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, that's fair, man. Parents had a life before. Like, I've seen my mom's yearbook picture when she was in high school, and she just, it's a different person, man. Like, different person. I wonder at what point, like, stuff I've been honest with my kid and told him about, and other stuff I would never tell my kid about because, like, reasons.
Yeah,
I
of course,
mean,
of course. But yeah, no, and I thought her chemistry with Michael J. Fox was great. Uh, the scenes where he wakes up and she's in a room with him, and he's like, "Wait, but you're high."
yeah. Oh, she's so good. She gets, talk about crush. She gets a massive crush on her own son. And it's like she's instantly attracted to this kid because he's good looking. But obviously, there's a connection there that she's not even aware of yet. And then we find out later in the car, she says, like, kissing my brother. Great line. There's
Yeah,
something to be said. The dialogue in this movie feels effing great, dude.
yeah. Calvin.
Yeah, Calvin. Why you keep calling me Calvin? Because it's written on your underwear. Jeez. Yeah, she is fantastic. Rounding out this, and I think I called it trio earlier, but this quartet, Thomas F. Wilson as Biff. I don't know if you could have cast this character better. Thomas Wilson does stand up. He's a very funny guy. He's still out there. He does the cons. I think Leah still does them as well. And seems like a great dude, has the best time. And Phil, he is absolutely, talk about a dunderhead jock, typical of any era. Phil, that character transcends time, but he's great as Biff, man. He's awesome.
Yeah. Ultimate meathead jock character, ultimate bully that gets to come up in character. He's absolutely great. The first time we see him in a movie in the present day, and he's just, oh my god, every bit as passive aggressive and annoying in those scenes, and it's just like, oh, this guy is a massive jerk.
Yeah. Yeah. He's so good. So believable. We all knew somebody like this in school. It may not have been one person. It could have been, he's sort of an amalgamation of all the terrible people you knew in high school. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, he's so great. It all the way to the point that there's something so endearing about how buffoonish he is, but
Yep.
then he'll do something. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, I just don't like you. I just hate you.
And of course, why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
Yeah, again, total meathead.
Yeah. And the way he treats his dad and stuff, it's freaking terrible and calls everyone butthead. Like, what an idiot.
Have you ever thought about the scenes in the car and how in present day he's still like hanging around and everything? I was like, this guy tried to rape. Guy tried to rape somebody. Like, wait a minute. This
Good
guy's just
point.
like the neighborhood guy that's just like still hanging around. Oh, that's Biff, loser Biff. Like that guy tried to rape somebody.
Yeah, sexual assault in 1955. I don't know if it was called that then, but yeah. He got a little too handsy, but he's not a bad guy. I don't know, Phil. I've always been curious about that
I don't
too.
know, man. She's in the car clearly saying no, and
Yep.
he's
Yep.
trying to do something in that car. I don't think
Yep.
he's just trying to kiss her. Like,
No. Yeah, the skirt's coming up. I mean, he's obviously, yeah. I mean, again, that is a jailable offense at this point in time, but not then so much. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about fan theories here in a bit because there's a ton of fan theories out there. Phil, a lot of times we don't really pay attention to that stuff, but some of them are so good as it pertains to this movie that we're going to have to talk about them. But that's one of them is that, he actually turned his life around because of that one punch and because it made him realize what a terrible person he had been. And then in the end of this movie, he ends up with his own auto detailing business and seems like a really nice guy. So his life turned around. But I'm like, yeah, but he still committed sexual assault in 1955.
yeah, I mean, I guess you're supposed to believe that a matter of choices can change somebody, but yeah, that's he still attempted to rape somebody. Yeah, but I mean, again, this is why Back to the Future 2 is just such a great movie. Because you need everything in this movie to get to the culmination of Marty standing outside that casino watching that screen and watching him marry his mom, and he's just no.
Yeah.
It works on so many levels after what we've seen in the first movie.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, it's so good. We were speaking earlier about how we were both kind of surprised nothing's ever happened. In a 2015 interview, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, or actually Zemeckis commented because supposedly he and Bob Gale own the rights to the film and its sequels. And Zemeckis in that interview said, no reboot or remake of the film would be authorized during his or Gale's lifetime. Phil, whenever the day comes we lose both these gentlemen, I assume a studio is going to be all over it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But, I could be wrong. But yeah, again, there's so much to this film and so many things, Phil. Talk about Eric Stoltz that it didn't work out and whatnot. We've said in the Avengers casting, like one wrong move, that those films don't work. Like I submit this film doesn't work if it had been anybody else other than Thompson, Lloyd, Fox, or Wilson as Biff. I mean, I submit it doesn't work, dude. I think you need the four of these people to make this franchise work.
Yeah, he just like we talked about with Leah Thompson. He is great in all the iterations we see him. Old man Biff we see in Back to the Future 2 is fantastic. And actually we get like 4 different versions of Biff because we get old man Biff, we get rich scumbag tycoon Biff, we get present day Biff, we get garden variety bully / sexual assault from the past, and he's great in every single iteration.
Yeah, he is. He's fantastic, and that's the 4 kids. That's your quartet. But we have to, of course, mention George McFly, Crispin Glover, whose quirky, eccentric nature, I submit, made this performance 100% worth it. We know he was not in the sequel. Well, not really. He was there in spirit, but it was weird, and there was a lawsuit and some money exchanged hands, and it should have because, Crispin Glover's likeness was used, I mean, with prosthetics, which is all kinds of weird, and some footage of him because he was not in the sequel, as we know. But that changed the trajectory of this franchise too, feels that Glover did not participate. But at least in this movie, he absolutely defined George McFly. And he's a big reason, I believe, why this movie worked to begin with. Because if he weren't believable, I think this movie kind of falls flat.
Yeah, I think there are a few dynamics with Crispin that you immediately want to like this guy. When we initially see him at the house, and he's just the dad, and he's just letting Biff walk all over him. And he's like, "Come on, Biff." And you want to like him in those moments where he keeps doing that obnoxious laugh, where he keeps like looking back at the camera and looking back at his family, and looking at the TV. It's so funny every time
It's
I
so
see it,
good.
and you just want to like him. But then when you see him as a teenager and how awkward and like weird he is, it's like, wait a minute, I see this dynamic, and how throughout the movie, Marty becomes friends with him and starts to like him and appreciate his dad. And it took me maybe all the way until I was in my 20s or an adult to understand. All right, wait a minute. You like this guy because he had a lot in common with the guy that you spend most of this movie running around with. Um, it cannot be a coincidence that you're running around with a character fresh out of a science fiction movie, and your dad is a science fiction writer. Your dad is a big dork and all of these things that um, Doc Brown probably was as a teenager.
Oh, good point. Yeah. Yeah.
Like his dad, in a lot of ways, is because look at it this way: if you see Doc Brown as a father figure for him, his actual dad has a lot in common with Doc Brown.
That's a good point. And George McFly, you talked about how awkward stuff. Dude, he climbs a tree to peep into a girl's window as she's changing.
Yeah, a lot of very odd things guys are doing in this movie with women.
Yeah. Yeah. It gets a little weird at times, kids. I'm not gonna
And
lie.
that's on top of the unintentional incest stuff that happens here.
Yeah. Got some Luke and Leia stuff happening for sure. So
Uh, yeah. What are you doing, George? You're a peeping Tom.
yeah. And what's great is when he gets hit by the car, the dad blames him for being in the road. He doesn't like even ask if he's okay. Talking about Marty, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but when because supposedly George is supposed to be in that spot and he's gonna get
Yes.
hit, and his dad would have blamed him for being in the road, but he's in the road because he's trying to look at your daughter
Yeah.
from a tree. Get undressed.
My God. Yeah. And as the story goes, Phil, of course, that she felt bad for him. And I guess through the process of them being around each other for long enough, they just fell in love. And then that's how they ended up together. But it wasn't like, this is the love of my life kind of thing. It was just,
Pity.
well, he's here. He's nice enough. I guess I'll just fall in love with him. And that just kind of
Yeah.
happened.
Had pity for the guy, then you end up settling for him.
Yep.
It happens. But
Yep.
he's such a likable guy. His only issue is that he just won't stand up for himself.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
but even outside of that stuff, he does so many awkward and funny things as a character. When he walks into the bar, well, it's not bar, the diner, to try to talk to his future wife early in the movie, and he walks in there and he asks for the malt, and it comes sliding, comes sliding down the table, and the way he picks it up and drinks it, it's just like, man, this guy is just he's the complete opposite of Marty in every way. Like, he is completely uncool, uncoordinated, uh, awkward guy, but it's just something so likable about him.
Yeah. He comes into the diner and he's like, milk, chocolate. And then he just guzzled it. It's so good, man.
Yeah, milk, chocolate. The way he picks it up and drinks it, it's so funny every time.
Like he's in a saloon. He's a cowboy or something in a saloon. Oh, like, dude, there's moments of him having that sweet spot, and you're like, kind of see why she fell in love with him. He's got some charm, but like,
Yeah,
he doesn't know how to show it, Phil, because he's so awkward.
yeah, he's such a such a massive dork.
Yeah,
It's like, how on earth did you produce this kid that is like the total opposite of you in every way? Knows how to talk to women, knows how to approach people, can enter a room and be life of the party no matter where he goes, and you're just you're just kind of a blip. You show up in a room and you could end up like standing along the wall and nobody would know you were there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But there again, he rounds out this cast and does an excellent job, and not the same movie if you cast somebody else. And we saw that in part two. Like, it obviously not the same guy. I mean, just again, I'm trying not to stray too far, but because I imagine we'll do parts 2 and 3 here eventually.
Boink Studios is the home of Tom Clark's main event, Tom Clark's 6M podcast, and Two Nations Under Ted, a Ted Lasso podcast. Visit the site today for links to every podcast platform, social media, special announcements, and a lot more. Check out the site and bookmark today, boinkstudios.com.
We do have to mention, we talked about Lorraine's parents. George DeCenzo and Frances Lee McCain are his parents. Jason Hervey is her younger brother, Milton, and we never meet we see Jailbird Joey, Phil, but he's a baby in a bassinet or in a playpen. That comes back. That's really good. I love that joke.
Okay, you see bars get
Yeah.
there are a few Joey bits and running gags throughout the movie where it's just like, where did this come from? Why was this in the movie? What is he in jail for? Do we ever find that out? What Joey's in jail for?
I don't remember. I don't know if they ever explain it in parts 2 or 3 or not. That's a good question.
Yes.
Supposedly they had not even planned on a sequel. They hadn't even talked about it, but Universal wanted one because of the crap ton of money this movie made.
Yeah.
But Zemeckis and Gale didn't even want to do it. They had to be talked into it.
Go figure. And
yeah,
had one of the most successful sequels of all time.
Yes.
But yeah, no, Lee Thompson coming in and dropping that big cake on the table at the beginning. Like, you guys are going to have to eat this yourselves. Uncle Joey didn't get out.
Yeah, again.
By
the way, speaking of the again line, when he hits Marty with the car, he goes, one of these kids ran in front of my car again. I'm like, is this not the first time you've hit a kid with your car? Crazy. Freaking nuts, man. Like, oh yeah, this has happened before. Yeah, I'm used to it. Crazy. Also on the casting, we have to mention Mark McClure, who is Marty's brother. We also know him, of course, as Jimmy Olsen from the original Superman films, and Winnie Jo Sperber, who played Linda, his sister. Winnie Jo Sperber, who's no longer with us. She died in 2005 from breast cancer, and she was in a lot of movies and had a TV career. I knew her from Bosom Buddies, which was Tom Hanks' breakout hit on TV. Yeah, that's how I knew her for years.
That's still funny to me that was his breakout role. I have never seen that TV show, and somebody actually told me what it was one day, and I looked it up, and I was like, this is the thing that put one of the greatest actors of our time on. Great.
It was one of the yeah, dude, I was a kid. It was hilarious to me. Looking back on it, you're like, this would never work. This would never happen. No. This would never, no one would ever be fooled. Of course they wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the craziness of Hollywood. But that was one of the things from the Cat Williams interview earlier this year, where he was like, I'd never get in a dress because they always want to get black comedians in a dress, and how that eventually ruined a career. And when you look on the other side of that, Tom Hanks got in a dress at the beginning of his career. Worked out pretty well for that guy. Didn't ruin his career at all.
Was it Gentlemen Prefer Blondes with Tony Curtis and oh God, who else is in that movie? They were, I think that's the movie they were dressed as women. Yeah, white guys did it all the time.
Yeah, Robin Williams, bunch of white comedians have done it, and it didn't ruin their careers. But that's the wackiness of Hollywood, and some things that are, I won't say inexplicable, but I just immediately think of that when you think Bosom Buddy, like Tom Hanks and the career that he went on to have after that. Who would have guessed that at that time?
Dustin Hoffman is Tootsie.
Yes, of course. That's another big one. Dustin Hoffman, massive success, taken seriously as a serious actor, and all these other things.
Yep.
But yeah, Marty's brother is so funny to me in this movie because he feels a lot of ways like, oh yeah, that's his son. Yeah, you can see how he produced that guy, because he's a bit of a dork like his dad,
Mm.
Not as dorky, but he's kind of like, oh, this guy, like he's typical annoying older brother guy. Uh, but that's why I'm like, Marty. How did Marty get in his family? He's nothing like the rest of them. Like,
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, not at all. You notice that like his brother, who by the way, it's Dave, it's his brother Dave. He's kind of an important part of this film, Phil, because of the picture. He's the one that starts disappearing first in the photo.
yes,
But you notice that in the first iteration of this family, they're like working class stiffs. In the second iteration, George as an author obviously has a very good career, not a job. His son is going to the office. He's no longer working manual labor. Like you can tell, like ambition was a thing in the second version of this family, not so much in the first one.
hmm
I thought that was quite telling. It's this idea of if you work that kind of a job, you don't have, I don't know, maybe that's me connecting wires that I shouldn't be connecting, but that's the appearance they give. Feels like, well, these people had ambition now. They're not going to settle for some menial job. I mean, forget that. He's in an office now. Things have changed now.
yeah. I mean, I think that's a fair assessment of it. But I also think that their family was the way that they were because you immediately got this idea from both of your parents that you don't have to venture out and try or do something and be afraid to fail because both of their parents already set that tone for them. Um, their dad is afraid to stick up for himself, and then their mom just settled for a guy because that was who she ended up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. There's so many quotable lines from this movie too. Like I always get stuck on Ronald Reagan, the actor. I don't know why I'm always stuck on that line.
So funny.
Such a good movie. Heavy. Was it? There's a problem with weight in the future? What's going on? Because he keeps saying this is heavy. That's a good line too. So much of this movie. Highly quotable.
uh, for whatever reason, too, there's so many doc lines like that shouldn't be as funny as they are, but they're very funny to me. When he's explaining to him, he was like, "Hey, man, don't plug your amp to that big speaker, man. You might there's a good chance you might blow it out." And it's like, well, too late.
Yeah. He does that in the opening moments of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to do that. Yeah. I mean, because, he's got to have the rock and roll aspect here for sure. And like, yeah, what is it? Roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. A lot of great quotable lines here, man. I like the bit when the car goes off the table, it's on fire, and they just both watch the car roll into the pile of dirty rags with the empty paint cans. It's a very show and tell comedic gag, like sight gag. Instead of running to put the fire out, they just wait and see what happens. And then when it happens, he's like, whoo. It's just that sound that he does. It's so great, man.
So funny. But it just fit Marty to a T that because the way he floats through the rest of the movie, it's like, oh man.
Yeah.
Like everything, it just feels like nothing is urgent to him in the moment. Like he's just like, oh man, that's messed up. I mean, like that's him blowing out the speaker. He's just kind of looking around afterwards, like, oops.
Yeah. Oh man, so many great moments. It says, since when can weathermen predict the weather, let alone the future? He's like, just this little stuff as you go through this movie. I mean, that leads me to the plot because we got to discuss the plot before we get into time travel stuff here. I don't see a lot of anything wrong with this plot, Phil. I freaking love it. If you want to, you can get hung up on the Libyan stuff. There's only two of them in a little VW van, which is called a terrorist van. Are they Libyans? I don't know that they are, really. I mean, they yell like they're from the Middle East, but who knows? And I guess if you want to get hung up on that, you can. But overall, I don't find a lot wrong with this plot, dude. I think the plot's pretty bulletproof, man. What do you think?
Plot still works very well. There are certain dated things that don't work now because of what we know about, politics and other things. It's the same thing that I was saying about Biff in the car. It's like, okay, if you think about that too hard, it's like, well, wait a minute. What is he doing in his car? Like, and it's the same thing with the scene with the Libyans. It's like, wait a minute. You got plutonium for wait, all right. Like, all right. Yeah, but no, the plot works very well because it's very sensible that and it's not like a lot of the heady time travel we get now. It's just all right. One change of events, one butterfly effect, this
Mm.
one different thing that happened in that day could change everything. It's just a matter of certain choices you make can change your entire life.
I love it. I love it. I mean, we talked at the beginning of this episode that other films have referenced in. Endgame referenced this, and it's hilarious because like they weren't shy about mentioning the movie, and you had all these really smart guys in the room, or what we deemed to be smart. One of them's James Rhodes, not a dumb guy by any means. Like, yeah, that's how it works. How time travel works, like Back to the Future. And they're all like, yeah, of course that's how it works. And Bruce had to tell him that's not at all how time travel works. But like as an audience member, film sitting there going, yeah, of course that's how it works. We all kind of agree. It's so weird how this movie kind of set the tone for, well, yeah, that's how time travel works. That's how it works in that movie, and it makes perfect sense.
Yes.
By the way, which version are you in terms of how you personally consider time travel? Are you Back to the Future or are you Marvel's Endgame or Avengers Endgame?
I am, because they do two different things. I would assume, like in the second movie, when all this stuff happens in the past and it changes the future, I would assume that just creates an alternative universe,
Mm.
because there has to be, like, I mean, for example, the second movie is a perfect example. When Marty comes back to the future, um, and everything's a mess. He's in this dystopian future where Biff is a millionaire and all these other things, and there has to be a Marty in the present, right? Because he went away and then he came back, and he's still, everything is the same for him. None of his memories have changed. Nothing. He's the same person that just exists outside of his timeline. There has to be a Marty in that timeline, though.
Yeah, you're right. How wrapped up do you get in that? Do you like intentionally fry your brain thinking? Because sometimes if I go down a rabbit hole of this time travel stuff, I'm like debating with myself about how much sense this makes. Do you know what I mean? How much do you actually nerd out on this stuff?
I mean, for this movie, in the time period it came out, I didn't think that hard about it. But the more science fiction we watch, the more pop culture stuff we get with time travel, the more it makes you second guess certain things now. But again, this movie is made in 1985, so I didn't think about all that back then. I
Yeah.
probably was not born when this movie was made.
Oh wow, yeah. I forget you're a kid, man. No, you're not a kid. Uh, no, that's fair. That's the thing, Phil. As guys my age have gotten older, or when we were kids when this came out, that's when the critical thinking comes. Is when you're a grown man later in life, and Hollywood has continued down the path of time travel and comic book science and all the other stuff we talked about here on the show for years now. That like you actually start in your head kind of going through all the theories and whatnot and saying, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I guess it's plausible that you wouldn't think about it till later. I don't think I did either. Although I will say, as a teenager, I debated time travel with my friends quite a bit, and this movie was definitely one of the things we talked about for sure.
Yeah. Uh, See, this movie was released July 3rd, 1985.
Mhm.
So I was approximately 4 days old.
Oh wow, 4 days old. What? Oh yeah, I'm sufficiently older now for sure. I love the idea of the Avengers explanation. Like if you travel to the past, that becomes your present, and anything happening from that point on is your future. I do like the concept of it. I don't know which one I firmly believe, but that's where some of the fan theories have come into play, Phil.
All right.
And dude, some of these theories are intense. Let's just say they're intense. Some of the stuff that folks have come up with over the years. And one of them that I didn't realize until very recently, don't know how I missed this one through all these years. But of course, it came from Reddit. A lot of this stuff comes from Reddit because a lot of fanboys have a lot of time on their hands. But the idea is there's two Martys, right? The original Marty, which is Marty A, and Marty B. Now, Marty B is the one that returned to 1985. He's the one we see at about the 30-minute mark of this film go to 85. And when he watches Marty A take off in the DeLorean is when the incident takes place. So in other words, Doc Brown sacrificed Marty A because at the end of the movie, when Marty comes back, Doc Brown's already aware that he's going to be shot and that Marty's going to get in the car and take off. Well, that Marty that's getting in the car and taking off, Phil, is disposable now because the present's already been changed by Marty's trip to the past. So now this second Marty's going to be sacrificed.
What?
Yes. And that the car is going to explode. It looks like it time travels, but actually it detonates.
Oh, God.
But look, it sounds hokum, but if you really think about it, there are two different Martys when this happens. Because the Marty that woke up, or, all right. So the Marty that gets back to Doc and tries to stop Doc's murder, he's got the bulletproof vest, the Libyans die anyway, and the other version of Marty goes off in the past. And as a kid, I'm like, well, of course he is. He's going back to change the past. No. The past has already been changed, and we have proof because this Marty's here now. So where's this other Marty going? Are we supposed to believe this is a time loop of Marty's going back and back and back? Or is this, do you know what I mean? Like, is this just doomed to happen again? Like, what are we looking at here? So if the answer is, this is now an alternative or an alternate version of Marty, or a replicant maybe, I don't know what you'd call this. It's like some Loki stuff we're getting into here. That Marty can't come back because he's already back. You see what I'm saying? God, it fries my brain.
Yeah, no, there should be a bunch of Marty variants running around.
Variants, that's it. Yeah.
But because it's present day, like the thing is, it should just create an alternate universe. And so when he comes back to the regular time and everything is changed, there should be a Marty that already exists in that timeline, in that parallel universe.
Yeah.
But that's not how this movie handles time travel.
That's fair. And Marty doesn't change, Phil. He's still the same Marty. Nothing has changed.
He's not. He doesn't have like the Ashton Kutcher temporal change as well, where he's like hemorrhaging blood out of his nose.
Right. Haircut's the same. Everything's the same.
Yeah, he comes back and like none of his memories changed to correct with time travel or anything.
Right. He's the only one who knows besides Doc that anything changed.
Yeah. He like I said, he's a variant. He exists outside of his timeline, but none of that affects him in any way.
No. See, when you really think about this, it'll mess with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same way if you really look at it, where when Doc goes back with him to the dystopian future, the second he popped into that timeline, he shouldn't exist.
You're right.
He's dead in that future.
Yep. Yes, for sure. It's again, it messes with you. And I think it's because of movies like Endgame and other time travel movies that have come through the years that makes you start questioning, wait a minute, does this science actually hold up?
Yeah, but I mean, it's all science fiction. It's not real science to begin with.
Yeah. As far as we know.
Pseudoscience.
Yeah. And, one of the other theories, and again, I think this is Reddit also, this idea, Phil, that people had never been able to get over, myself included. How did George and Lorraine not recognize Marty, their son, as the Marty that helped them?
Yeah, that is also funny. When he comes back, they never are like, wait a minute, this guy looks familiar.
Yeah.
Marty. I like that name.
Yeah. Yeah. They had to throw that in. That's a given. Had to throw that in. Yeah. Well, again, our friends at Reddit, one of these guys on Reddit came up with this idea, this notion that he did know, George did know, but Phil, the idea is that George just assumed, he believed that the original, this guy called himself Calvin Klein or whatever, was actually an alien. He believed the guy he met in the 50s was an alien. He recognizes the fact that Marty begins pushing for him to ask Lorraine out at the same time he receives a mysterious visit from Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan. Even the sci-fi book George later publishes adds substance to this theory. Yeah. And supposedly that's why when the boy starts maturing and George realizes, wait a minute, that's why he looks like the alien, because all this was foretold to me and I had to do what I did to stop Biff.
Yeah, when you think about George has to have some really, really messed up crackpot theories by the time present day.
Oh,
he's definitely one of those guys on the Lizard chat room.
Lizard people running the country, is that what you're suggesting?
He's definitely one of those people in those weird chat rooms.
I mean, if you got to explain it. We talked about the one where, Biff's life is remarkably or markedly better than what it was had he continued down the path. But before, again, you see the name on the side of the truck. He's got his own business. He's not like he's a dreg of humanity. He's not like such a loser. He's not successful in some fashion. It's not until part two we know the guy's kind of still a loser, but like we don't really know that in the end of this film. But that theory's out there. There's a bunch of others, and a lot of times, Phil, again, I don't really think about any of that stuff, but some of them are kind of good.
Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you.
There's also a claim about Biff, of course, as we said, trying to force himself on Lorraine. This one I don't get. This idea of that happened regardless, which is why she is so defeated the first time we see her, and she's so ho-hum, and she gave up on life, and she ended up with George. I'm like, how do you make the case for that, for Biff being in the parking lot at the exact same time she's there? Because the timeline's been changed by Marty taking his own mom to the prom to begin with. There's no guarantee Biff would have even been in that parking lot or been so upset he wanted to punch this other guy he had never met before. Like, to me, that's where logic kind of wears thin here.
Yeah. So you're saying that same assault happened in the car, but George never stood up for her, and that's why she just ended up a shell, and she's not as outgoing and all of these things. And maybe that's why at the beginning of the movie she's explaining why, no, as a woman you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to be forward with men because I did this thing and I blame myself for what happened to me.
Ooh, yeah, maybe.
And so maybe, but I feel like that's also, you're then making some stretches to get there.
Yeah, I agree. Because also they did tell Marty as he was growing up and his brother and sister that George took her to the dance and that's where they had the first kiss. How does all that happen with a sexual assault in the same night?
Yeah, I would assume that she wouldn't have still gone to the dance after that.
Yeah.
I don't think she would. That would happen in the car, and then she would go in the dance and have this romantic, life-changing night with George. No, I'm sad.
Yeah. Some of the other ones are going, let's say there's one about supposedly Marty's actions changing Doc Brown's views on time travel. And supposedly that, let's see, Marty shares that he witnessed his father punching Biff outside the dance, something George had never done previously. And, remember when he tells him that, there's a moment of Doc Brown going, wait a minute, but he doesn't consider it too long. They have to get the car going to get Marty back to his own time. But in that moment, Brown realizes, wait a minute, you can change the future.
Yeah.
Which is why he decides to take the letter back up after Marty's gone back to his own time. That one I can kind of get behind because it makes sense to me.
Yes. Yeah. All of that, I get it. But yeah, some of the stuff, the fanfic, I get it. I get like trying to create your own headcanon around this stuff. And it does kind of add to interpretation. It adds to certain people's enjoyment of these things, but sometimes it gets stretched a little bit too far. I
agree. Yeah.
I think for logical reasons, I can't buy into that still happened in the car. But I think the main issue is, it's not just that I settled for this guy that I've just always been with since high school. If this guy doesn't stand up for himself, he's not going to stand up for you. And I think a life with that kind of person, you're going to kind of take on this dour life view of just like, okay, this is going to be what it is.
Yeah, that's true. This movie is very simplistic in the story, Phil, because unless you really sit down and think about your past, you may or may not have life-defining points in which, had you went left instead of going right, your entire life changes. Some people have them. Some people don't know they have them. Other people, it's all they can think about. Like if you peaked in high school, or if you you're still 10 years after the fact hanging on to the guy that, or wish you hadn't left the guy or whatever the case may be. I mean, I get it. But like, I think that's why this movie hits home for so many of us, Phil, is that this idea of, man, if only things had gone differently, if only I had another chance, if only I could go back and, what if this didn't happen for me? Where would I be now? Like, I think that's one of the reasons why this story has always upheld through 30 years now, and why it works so well to this day, man.
Yeah, I mean, it is also for the time period it came out, and the country and everything, where the country was at this time, politics and everything. Um, at its core, it's just of this belief that you're one right decision away from being successful, and that's where when you say that they go from just being working class to being, um, I assume at least middle class.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's a big part of the mindset with this country. Hey, you're one really good decision away from doing pretty well for yourself.
Yeah, it's like the American dream kind of thing. A
Yeah.
one good decision will take you to where you want to go.
Yeah, I mean that's throughout the movie. I mean, we see it with the political stuff, with the mayor stuff. We see it with them mentioning Ronald Reagan, and again, that's a big part of like the time period. Trickle down economics, very American.
Yeah. Trickling down to who? It never quite made it there, Phil.
Yeah,
Never quite made it there.
yeah. Biff's story as well. That's Biff one decision away from being a millionaire.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. And speaking of Biff, a little bit of trivia. Tom Wilson apparently disliked working with Eric Stoltz. Said he found him a little too serious and a little too aggressive. And before Stoltz was released from the project, they'd already filmed the near fight between Marty and Biff in the high school cafeteria. During takes of the scene, Stoltz would push back on Wilson so hard that Wilson got bruises. Although in real
Wow.
life, Wilson was nothing like the bully that Biff is, he wanted to get his revenge. He had planned to get back at Stoltz by giving him a real punch in the gut during the scene where he pulls Marty out of the car at the dance. But Stoltz was fired before Wilson got that chance. Holy Lord.
This this sounds like Jake the Snake waiting in the curtain for Ultimate Warrior to come back in the back because he's planning to do something terrible to him.
Yes. Yes.
By do something terrible to him, it sounded like he wanted to kill him.
Oh, yeah. There's product placement in this film.
Yes.
Burger King, Toys R Us. There's Zales on the park bench. If you look, there's stuff all over the place, man.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big part of the second movie as well. A lot of product placement.
What's funny is they claim it wasn't, that those things just happened to be there at the beginning of the movie, and that Zemeckis confirmed that. They just happened to be there while they were filming. I'm like, well, I'd at least take advantage of it. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, if nothing else, that is a part of how influential this movie it was as well, because I'm sure a lot of businesses looked at this and was like, hey, that did pretty well for us. Maybe we should start paying for this product placement.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. The film was banned in China for a while because the notion of time travel disrespects history. The ban has since been lifted. Well,
Did not know that.
Yeah.
But man, that just again takes me back to how big of a cultural phenomenon this movie is. And when you think of like Kushida coming out and his whole character is based around Marty, and just so many other things around the world where this thing is just like a global, it's a global thing. Everybody around the world knows Back to the Future. Even if you haven't seen the movie, you know it. You know like some reference to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's cross generations, man. I mean, I'm sure there's people my age and older who shared this film with their kids. I mean, it's absolutely transcended, generations, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Man, again, so much good stuff happening here. And like this movie is so freaking great. I mean, there's just, again, I have a soft spot for it because I grew up with this movie. But again, even as kids, like you tend to have a radar for stuff. Like kids like to think they're the coolest things ever and that they're smarter than everybody else. So like if a movie's talking down to you, you kind of tend to feel like it. You kind of tend to feel it anyway. Yeah, but I mean, I never felt this. I never felt like that with this movie at all. It always felt like it was. I don't know. It just was hitting all the right notes, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. There are a lot of things in this movie that I immediately connect with. That's why I'm like, yeah, George, in a lot of ways, is not the main protagonist of this movie, but he's so likable in so many ways. Uh, in the way Crispin plays him, it's just Crispin has this way of playing things, and just his facial expressions and everything just makes things better. Just the faces he's making when um he goes to get Biff off of Lorraine. Hey, get your hands off of it. Just his delivery of that line is hilarious. Uh the facial expressions he's making when he's shocked that Biff pushed her down. He's just
Yeah.
like, ah,
Yeah.
ah.
Yeah. His delivery just makes it. And stuff that they throw in the Twin Pines Mall becomes the Lone Pine Mall because Marty knocked the other tree down when he went back to 55.
My pine tree.
Yeah. So that's good. There's other little seeds they plant all the way through this movie. There's a bit of graffiti outside the school. If you look at it, I never noticed it till now, or never knew about it till now. One of the pieces of graffiti is Lorraine Del Calvin, and it's an Easter egg because you're led to believe. Well, it's sort of a warning of what's coming that Lorraine's going to fall in love with Calvin Klein. So there's little stuff they plant all through the movie that you don't know about till later. So that's cool. I mean the car, Phil, the DeLorean, the coked out dude that started that company named the car after himself. That's ballsy. And solid
80s.
steel frame and everything. Phil, there's supposedly, I think, still a company in this country that produces DeLoreans with all original parts and everything. It's a warehouse somewhere. You can get that car ordered, but it ain't going to be cheap, Phil. How'd you like to have a DeLorean?
That's got to be like one of those like prized grail possessions for a lot of people. There's an episode of American Dad where uh, Stan is trying to get all the pieces to put together the DeLorean and restore it.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout this episode, Steve is making all these references to Back to the Future, and Stan doesn't get it at all because he just is in love with the idea of a DeLorean and the guy that invented it. He's never seen Back to the Future.
Oh my
It's
God.
such a funny bit. It's such a funny episode. Towards the end of the episode, Stan drops the line, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." And Steve gets excited. He goes, "You have seen the movie?" And he was like, "No, I just thought that was a cool line to say."
Yeah. It's like, was it Michael Keaton quoting TLC in that? Was it the other guy's movie, I think?
I love the other guy so much, and Michael Keaton is fantastic in it. He just keeps doing it throughout the movie, and
It's like, that's TLC. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Something I say. What do you mean? Yeah. Oh, it's ridiculous. Yeah, that car that supposedly, well, as I said, the company's in Texas, by the way. They're using old stock and reproductions. And you can order your DeLorean, kids, if you're so inclined.
Wow.
Yeah, the models built now feature a flux capacitor. So
Wow.
saying.
Yeah, I mean, the DeLorean is already super duper 80s. It's about as 80s as the big brick phone and just like a lot of the things from the 80s that like you immediately look at and has like this nostalgia to it. But then when you add the cultural significance of it being the car from Back to the Future, um, it gave it another life on its own. Um, and I mean, I do think there's something to at that time. There's something so futuristic looking about the DeLorean. It didn't look like other cars. It looked ahead of its time.
Mm. Yeah, you're right. It still looks ahead of its. I mean, it still looks like something out of well, for lack of a better phrase, sci-fi movie.
It does. And I mean, I wonder how much of that is that it actually has been in a sci-fi movie. So it's kind of like, yeah, it is sci-fi. Like,
Yeah.
But it's right up there. It's up there with one of the most iconic cars from any movie. It's right up there with like the original Batmobile from the '80s movie, and all these other like movie cars that you can think of. I'm sure if there's like a backlot somewhere, there used to be the backlot at MGM Studios at Disney World, and I'm pretty sure there was a DeLorean there.
That makes sense. The gigawatts that he talks about is actually
Gigawatts.
gigawatts. It's actually gigawatts, but supposedly the word gigawatts was like slang for how it was said at one point. So they just went back to the way it used to be. It's actually gigawatts, which is a real thing. I never knew that till now. I just thought it was a word they just made up. Actually, I maybe thought it was a real thing, but it was some. It was like some unachievable number that we would never hit. I don't know what I thought, honestly.
I don't know how it is that Jay-Z has never made a song called Gigawatts.
That's a good point, actually.
Why did that never happen?
Why did that not
And
happen?
I mean, there's been tons of like hip hop references to Back to the Future. I believe there's like a Ludacris mixtape where it's all a reference to Back to the Future, the cover and everything.
Oh, that's great. I had no idea that happened. You know, we didn't mention the principal, James Tolkien as Strickland.
It's Strickland.
Strickland. He's still with us, man.
You're a slacker.
Age 93.
I love that he is just complete no nonsense, and he says things that are like, wow, that was kind of mean, but then also it's like, wait a minute, he might have a point. When he's like, no McFly has never amounted to anything. It's just like, well, wait a minute, that was kind of mean. And then when you look at his house, it's like, oh, well,
He's kind of right. Yeah. He's
you're a
kind of
slacker,
right.
just like your dad was.
Yeah. There's other people we haven't mentioned yet, like the three thugs that hang out with Biff. Skinhead 3D and Match. Jeffrey J. Cohen, Casey Simasco, and Billy Zane, respectively.
Yeah, a very 80s trope of the bad guy has to have his henchmen that all have like a defining characteristic or like some kind of thing that makes them stand out. 3D had the 3D glasses that he constantly wore throughout the entire movies. I don't know why that was his thing. And it's still their thing. It's his henchmen in the second movie in the future.
Yeah.
Like I said, very 80s trope for the henchman for the bad guy.
It's like your ego is so your real ability is so thin and your ego is so big. You need yes men around you to prop you up and agree with everything you say. I mean, good thing that stuff doesn't exist anymore. Because let's just assume like if it existed in politics, you know, that'd be a really bad thing to have someone that's that megalomaniacal. Thank God it's not real, Phil. We'd all be in trouble.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's your jab. So
Yeah. Who would possibly believe that in the future that a reality TV show could could go into politics and, you know, almost get people killed, including his running mate, and then just run again, and another guy would just show up and be his running mate like nothing happened.
yeah, like nothing happened.
Weird.
We're living in a horrible reality series. That's the truth.
That was a that was another references movie, of course. I can't remember who was the first person that made it. But of course people were like, Trump is just Biff after he got the sports almanac.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But yeah, so at some point, that was a reoccurring joke on social media. I can't wait until somebody invents the time machine so somebody can go back in time and stop Trump from getting the sports almanac.
That's great. And very apropos. Makes sense. We have not mentioned Goldie Wilson, the future mayor of Hill Valley. Yeah, this is Donald Fullilove and as Goldie Wilson. And if not for Marty Phil, this guy doesn't decide to run for mayor because he apparently never had the idea until Marty said something about it.
Do you ever think about that? Two pivotal black characters. One's not a character, one's an actual real person. Got the idea to do things that changed their careers because this guy showed up and told them to do it.
I don't know if I've ever thought about that before.
Yeah, yeah. I think about that often with the Johnny B. Good scene of like, wait a minute. So you're telling me Chuck Berry didn't invent rock and roll? Marty McFly did. wasn't a black guy that invented rock and roll. It was this white guy that came back from the future that invented it.
It's your cousin, Marvin. Marvin Berry. They had to really stress. So the audience would go, oh, I know who he's talking to. Yeah, yeah. That's something. Well, yeah, because it's like the chicken and egg thing. Who really was he or did Chuck? Like Chuck did it to begin with, but did he? Because like Marty's going to go back anyway. Has this already happened? Oh, it just hurts my brain to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, the version of time travel that this movie employs, it can mess with you. I have to admit, I think way more about nerdy stuff than I should at my age, but I still do because I'm forever a nerd. I can't help myself. Yeah, we said what we said about them not gonna wanting to do anything else with this. I'm okay with that. I just don't, like you said earlier, I agree. I don't think we need to worry about any of that stuff. I think this movie's perfect as is. I need to go watch part 2, dude. It's been a long time since I've seen part 2. I've seen the first movie much more than I've seen part 2 and 3, to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how much have you seen parts 2 and 3 in relation to the first one?
I've seen part 2 probably the most out of the entire franchise. I've seen 2 dozens of times. It's my favorite of the franchise, but it's also because 2 came out in 1989, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but yeah, I was closer of age to watch it by then. So by the time it came to TV, I had to assume I was about 5 years old, and so I've seen that one a lot more, and it's a lot more. I've seen it a lot more growing up. I would say that I grew up with that movie more than I grew up with the first movie.
Yeah, part 2 is 89 and part 3 was in 90 because they filmed those movies at the same time, or they filmed them back to back. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
They were shot back to back, excuse me. And supposedly the sequel script was so long it was split into part 2 and 3 because 2 and 3 was going to initially be part 2.
Oh, so that was just going to be one whole movie.
Apparently so, but they just had so much to plow through. Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
But I mean, talk about even just the cultural impact of the second movie and just how many things spawned off of that. The Nikes from that movie are actually real. We live in a time where you can actually, if you have a lot of money, go buy a pair of Air Mags and they actually lace up.
Isn't that crazy?
Insane. But, of course, those are extremely rare. And if you do find them now, they're worth thousands of dollars.
I'm sure. We didn't mention the whole Marty's girlfriend business. Jennifer, in this movie, she is Claudia Wells. But in the sequel, she's Elizabeth Shue because I think the story goes that Wells had an illness in the family, I believe. So she couldn't return for the sequel. So they recast her. Which Jennifer is your favorite, by the way?
I mean, Elizabeth Shue is such a big part of that time period. Adventures in Babysitting, so many other things she'd done. So, I mean, again, Back to the Future 2 is my favorite one. So when I think of Jennifer, I always think of Elizabeth Shue.
Yeah. So we've went about an hour and a half. We could do another hour and a half and still, I think still not quite get everything that we could possibly get for this movie out there because God, there's just so much to talk about. And again, the cultural impact this movie's had since 1985 is just effing nuts. So much stuff that we've talked about that we still haven't mentioned that again, dude, this would take forever, but I think it's very much a cornerstone of the 80s and of,
yeah.
I mean, it feels like, is it too big to say that this kind of changed things moving forward? Like this idea of, he's a younger guy. It's a sci-fi thing, but it's not Star Trek or Star Wars, but it can be fun. I mean, it kind of feels like this changed things after this movie hit, man.
I definitely think it did. I think it changed what franchises ended up turning into be. This movie kicked off like this craze of building franchises and trilogies. From that point on in the 80s, I mean, think about all the actors we named throughout this thing and all the things they went along to do. Like Elizabeth Shue wasn't in this movie, but being in the second movie and all the other things that she was in, like I said Adventures in Babysitting, but of course the love interest in the first Karate Kid movie, uh, bunch of other things, Leaving Las Vegas, all these other great things, and like, I mean, you don't have to look too long to see a bunch of these other guys showing up and doing character stuff and other things. Crispin Glover doing a bunch of things throughout his career as well.
Mm.
Uh, every time I think about him, I think about him being the very creepy assassin in the Charlie's Angels movie. It's just like, wait a minute, no, that's George McFly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, but he's very creepy assassin in that movie that has this weird penchant for ripping people's hair out and sniffing it.
Hmm. You know, I always thought that if they ever move forward with a film version of The Killing Joke, that he is absolutely the Joker. The haircut, the body type, everything's perfect.
Yeah, I think it would have worked. Yeah, as we speak, there is a trailer out for the new Joker movie.
Ah, there is. Yeah,
No man.
yeah, I don't really care. I just the first one was disturbing. And you know, I've seen my share of movies and TV shows and whatnot, but like, I don't know. It as that movie went on, I thought this doesn't have to be the Joker. This could have been anything. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why you needed the face paint and whatnot. I don't know what it adds to it. And then you're changing the story, which, you know, well, it's Thomas in Elseworlds. It's fine. I don't care. It didn't break my heart at all. But like, do what you want to do. But I
Very
don't know.
very divisive movie.
Yeah. This idea that we're going to praise this murderer at the end of this film is weird.
Well, I don't want to get into my lore of that movie, but um, a thing that has been hammered home with the Joker as a character in the comics and as the movies is that he has his perspective of how things went and how things
Mm.
actually went. Uh, he's been shown to be seen as very delusional or a liar several times, and so I've always read that movie as okay. Some of this stuff probably didn't happen. This is just how he thought it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's fair. Yeah. Again, well, it's like this movie or anything else. It's just based on, you know, how much money does it make? Does it afford a sequel? Does the studio get behind? Does the cast want to do it again? And you know, when it comes to Back to the Future, we know it got 3 films. We assume it's not going to get anything else. I don't even know that have there been novelizations? Has there been like, I don't even know if there's been a podcast series. Has there been a comic book? Like, I really don't have the answers to these questions.
Yeah, the cartoon. I remember the cartoon.
Oh, how did I forget a cartoon?
Yeah.
It just, you know, it does kind of feel like sort of a little pocket of time that these 3 movies exist. And because they're not going to move forward with anything else, it's fine. Because, you know, I wouldn't dread something new because, you know, it depends on what the thing is. And I think there's penchant for anything to go very well or very poorly, depending on what it is. But I kind of like that these movies are being left alone, man.
Yeah, I think you can. I have to assume that there's probably a script somewhere of somebody um, trying to do this over or trying to reboot it. Um, yeah, I'm sure if you look online, there's probably already people that have been trying to get something greenlit. It's just never happened.
Yeah, and you're right about the cartoon. It aired on CBS between 91 and 92.
Yeah, I remember.
Doc and Marty's adventures through various historical periods, intercut with live action segments featuring Christopher Lloyd performing science experiments alongside Bill Nye. The short film called Doc Brown Saves the World in 2015 celebrated the film's 30th anniversary. Lloyd, of course, reprised his role of Doc, who must travel to the future to prevent a nuclear holocaust in 2045. There is a musical, Phil. Have you seen any clips from this thing at all? Because it's like going right now, I believe.
I've never seen it, but most of these things have musicals.
Yeah. I think it's a hit. I believe. I think that from what I've read, it's been very well received. So yeah, they described it as the best way to give fans more Back to the Future without adding to the film series. And in the end, the Back to the Future franchise is considered to be one of the most successful film franchises in history.
Yeah, nothing says 80s though of like having a movie do very well and then it turning into a cartoon.
Yeah, that's true. It happened a lot.
Yes.
That was
Ace
kind of the
Ventura.
go-to move.
Ace Ventura, I think of immediately. Ace Ventura cartoon. That wasn't 80s, but
Hmm.
still. The Mask cartoon. Bill
Yep.
and Ted's Excellent Adventures cartoon.
Yep. God, a lot of stuff.
Beetlejuice cartoon.
Yeah, that's right. That was definitely a thing for sure. Well, kids, there it is. Again, we could spend another hour and 40 here, I think, and keep talking about a lot of other stuff that happened in this film. But again, I'd like to do parts 2 and 3 at some point. So if we do it all now, we'll have nothing to do then. So I don't want to do that. Part 2 will be try to focus solely on part 2 as we try to do with part 1 here. And the good thing is we're under no time crunch because these films aren't going anywhere. Spielberg or no one else that we know of is like, oh, we're going to take these and we're going to add more effects to them, and you can't watch the originals anymore. So hopefully that doesn't happen. I just have to go get bootleg versions like I did with the Star Wars trilogy. Again, we've got what we've got. I'm happy with it. Of course, I'm happy with it. This movie's part of my childhood, man. Like, Phil, you got to say, like, this concept of there's no original ideas left in Hollywood, I submit it's pretty darn true. Because we just keep going back to like 80s properties and making movies and streamers or whatnot, or we keep going back to old ideas and doing reboots and prequels and sequels and whatnot. It's because people of a certain age are now working in the business of making these things. And this is the stuff they grew up with. I mean, to me, it makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, I can kind of understand it, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to the idea that there are no original ideas, but I also just think that they don't make movies like this anymore, man. Like this movie just had the complete package. It was very well written, had a great story, had the great cast, great score, great music. Um, just the presentation of it, the set design, costumes, everything. It just had everything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Everything's perfect. When they go back to 55, it feels like 55. And well said. Everything just clicks, just clicks. And again, kids, we talk all the time about how the cast has to be right and things have to go through, and sometimes it's just by a stroke of luck that something's made. If you need any more proof, here it is. The script for this movie was rejected 44 times before it was finally greenlit.
Wow.
44 times. So yeah, this movie, I guess you could say, potentially could not have been made. I guess most movies you could say that about, but yeah, again, we're lucky we have it. Well, Phil, until we hit part 2, which will be at some point in the future, and part 3 as well, give me your last word on part 1 of Back to the Future.
One of the most iconic movies of all time. Again, cannot overstate its influence, its impact on pop culture. The fact that it is a massive uh, global phenomenon. I mean, we've talked about all of the things that in some ways it influenced. But also, when you tell me how many times that script got denied, the story of this movie of this one decision can change somebody's entire life, and just how this one movie changed so much. It's really crazy to think about. It's kind of meta in a certain way. Uh, like think of it this way. The idea of like futurism and all of these things went into Kanye West's third album, Graduation, and he makes a DeLorean reference in that album. And when I think of Kanye West's career and how many times he got denied before he actually got signed. I'm sure people are probably listening like, where are you going with this? But just the idea of just like just the idea that like this movie could have never been made.
Mm.
But when it was, it changed everything. It just completely changed the way franchises were made, just completely changed everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, imagine a world without Back to the Future.
Yeah, it does. But I mean, that's essentially where I'm going with the Kanye thing because it's like,
Yeah.
even when you think of Kanye, uh, I know that he's very polarizing, and I'm not the biggest fan anymore. But just like I just can't even imagine music. I can't imagine pop culture if he did not eventually break.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It ended up a train wreck, but it didn't start off that way.
No, one of the most influential artists of his time by
Yeah.
far.
Well, kids, there you have it. Again, it almost didn't happen, but you got it. You almost had Eric Stoltz and you didn't get him. By the
Yeah.
way, shout out to Eric Stoltz, a fine actor in his own right.
Yeah, but I mean, even like when you think of just how many creatives, and I guess that ties into what I'm saying with Kanye West and so many other artists and their story of trying to break through and how this movie captured so many people's imagination. It's wild to think about.
God, it really is. Yeah. Again, I can't imagine a world without it. And in your own little corner of the universe, kids, if you're a sci-fi minded individual, you've already thought about this movie before and the whole concept of time travel. It's such a romantic notion to not necessarily go back and change something horrible, or I'm going to stop the Kennedy assassination or something, or maybe you
Mhm.
personalize it to your own life. Like, well, if only I'd kissed that girl, or if only I'd what if I hadn't made this job change? What if I hadn't drove that car? What if I mean it's weird. Like a lot of the sci-fi stuff is like aliens are invading and we have to, we're fighting back. But like when it comes to time travel stuff, yes, it can have far-reaching potential, but it starts off so small. Like Barry Allen just wanted his mother back. He didn't want her to die. Like
Yeah.
so many little things. It's such a personal tale. I think time travel is maybe the most personal of all the sci-fi tropes that exist because everybody can relate to wishing you had done things differently or wishing that you could stop something terrible from happening. Like
Yeah.
I think that's why that always works, man, to some degree or another.
But I'd also wonder how much of that is the influence of this movie as well. That this movie personalized time travel. It took it from not just being this big heady abstract notion of what time travel could be, but also made it into this thing that was very relatable and grounded in some ways.
Mm. Yeah, well, that's a good point. Maybe it's so personal now because this movie made it that way.
Yeah, and I just think that because we talked about how much this has changed the way people see time travel. Because I mean, there are other time travel movies that have done it in a similar way, but they were undoubtedly influenced by this movie. Like when you think of a movie like Meet the Robinsons, the Disney movie, um, it does kind of the same kind of familial thing with time travel, and it makes it such a personal story.
Mm,
But I cannot see how it's not influenced by this movie in any way. It's
mm,
impossible. It's impossible they wouldn't be influenced by it.
yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right.
Which is a great movie, by the way. Meet the Robinsons, really
Mm.
good.
Yeah, there's again, I'm a nerd for this stuff, man. It's probably my favorite, but look, Phil, here's the thing. If you're going to get into a time travel novel or series or book, you got to pack a lunch cuz like if usually there's a lot to go through and there's a lot of things you'll have to remember and there's a lot of keeping it straight in your head how the writers chose to do it here, and how they chose to move forward and how they chose to handle the characters and the whole concept of it. But like, man, once you get in, like I've been watching the Lazarus Project. Fantastic. Got canceled after 2 seasons. I'm like, what are we doing? It's dude, it's some of the most well written time travel stuff I've ever seen. It's so good. But it's like, it's yeah, it's again, it's a different form, but they take a different approach to it. But man, it's like if you want to invest your time, Phil, you can. But man, it's you really have to get into it. And that's not to say that it's not worth it. I think it depends on what the property is, of course. But it is a lot to get through, man, for sure.
Yeah. Would you say that it's fair to say that Back to the Future made time travel mainstream?
I mean, I think so. There was stuff before this, but I don't recall anything that was to this degree. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but
Yeah, of course there are other time travel stuff before it, but I'd had to assume this was because this was such a big, massive pop cultural moment.
Yeah.
Because I have to assume most of the other science fiction stuff was very niche. This is, of course, not niche at all. Like, I mean, you can talk to anybody about Back to the Future.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, we talked earlier about how much of this has just really taken hold of pop culture, and again, to this day, is still being talked about. I mean, it has been referred to as a pop culture touchstone, and still fans of this movie to this day. And it's been compared to the Wizard of Oz because it still appeals to children as well as adults, and there's something here for everybody, honestly. Like, but I agree with you, and as virtue of the fact that Christopher Lloyd has said many times he's been approached by fans from all around the world who said that the film inspired them to become a scientist, which is very cool.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, man. Yeah.
But I mean, even that in itself, that you're saying this movie, I saw this and it encouraged me to be a scientist. But think about how many people this might have encouraged them to be a musician or to do anything else or to write science fiction or to be an artist or anything. Like, I think that it's had that big of an impact on the world.
It's also been given credit for the resurgence of skateboarding in the 1980s. Yes.
That's funny. I didn't know
Isn't that something? Yeah.
But yeah, that's again, of course, we don't want to get too much into the second movie, but how much the hoverboard was the coolest thing ever to me when I saw it.
Yeah. I mean, the Ready Player One
Yeah.
refers heavily to this film.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, that is also, the skateboarding thing in this movie is Marty going everywhere by basically hitching a ride to the backs of people's cars and skateboarding.
Wonderful.
Very 80s, but also something about that time period. Why did it seem like a lot of the protagonists in these movies, they had to do something incredibly outlandish like this that was like some stuntman stuff, like what I mentioned earlier with Teen Wolf and him doing the handstands on top of the car. Like, why was it such a big thing in the 80s?
It seems very dangerous to me. Yeah, you're right. Like, we need our heroes to be daring and fearless, and
Yeah, because that made you cool. If you were a surfer or a snowboarder, you did something extreme.
yeah, the X Games. So yeah. Well, I mean, it's this thing takes credit for a lot of things, not the least of which is skateboarding, which is effing nuts. Again, man, there's just so much here, and this movie's responsible for it. Like you said, great art inspires people to become artists. And I mean, that's, I know it's just a film, kids, I get it. It's just a movie. But like, I don't know. I feel like this is art, man. I feel like, again, the acting is spot on. The dialogue is there. Again, there's something everybody can relate to. Even if all you related to was the bully that pushed you around relentlessly in high school, there's something here for everybody, dude. So there you go, kids. We've added our 2 cents worth to it, at least for now, at least to the opening chapter of this here little franchise. We have done these kind of things before. We've done 3 film franchises and beyond. And sometimes we choose to do all 3 films. Sometimes we don't, depending on how part 3 shaped up. If you're a fan, you'll know what movies I'm talking about, the franchise I'm talking about. I suspect that parts 2 and 3 will be covered here on the show, because I believe there's enough there for, of course, to do a full run of the entire series. So I'm looking forward to that. But kids, there you have it. There's Back to the Future. Stay tuned for more. Keep your eyes open for our review of part 2 and part 3 coming your way eventually. Keep your eyes open. Subscribe and download as always, and we appreciate it. And that is Back to the Future.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.